From Glendale, Arizona, I'd like to introduce our keynote for tonight, Kerri K.
Do housekeeping here. Hi, everybody. I'm Kerri, Grateful Al-Anon.
Hi, Kerri.
Y'all clean up. You know, Cliff said he didn't know if they spoke what'd you say, hillbilly? I don't know if they speak redneck, so we're going to get a chance to see if they type it, rather. I was born, well, first of all, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you, Abby, for contacting the central office. That's the kind of Al-Anon I am. You're looking for me? I'm going to find you. I'm grateful to always... Sorry, one more thing I need to do. We'll get going here in a minute. It's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to share my story of recovery in the Al-Anon family group. I didn't really think I was wanted anywhere by the time I got to you. These conventions take a lot of effort to put on, and there's a lot of work that goes in all year. And if you haven't studied the traditions a lot and you need to, or your sponsor suggests it, get on a committee, and I guarantee you'll learn about them. Can we all give them another hand for this committee? I come to you today from Phoenix, Arizona. My home group is Principles Above Personalities. We meet Thursday night at 6 o'clock in Central Phoenix. If you're ever going to be in Phoenix, just give me a holler and I'll take you to a meeting. It takes just a second because my heart doesn't start pounding until Abby got up here. Now it's like about to pop out of my chest. It'll slow down here in a minute. I was born on a 500-acre cotton and soybean farm in a small town, outside of a small town outside of Sledge, Mississippi. That's 50 miles south of Memphis, Tennessee. I'm 53 years old. My Al-Anon birthday, just to get this out of the way, is May 17th, 1989. I got to you when I was 24 years old by the grace of God. Al-Anon, alcoholism, or the family disease of alcoholism, or ism, I say, beat me into a sense of desperation, and for that I'll be eternally grateful. I could have been out there a long time and probably would be dead today if I hadn't found these rooms. But I was born into a farming family, and until I was 13 years old, the closest telephone to our home was 3 miles away. There was not much information coming in or going out of where I lived. I was not born into active alcoholism. I had to come here to you people to catch that. But what I know today is that the alcoholism was all in my family tree. My grandmother was a classic untreated Al-Anon. She was raised by alcoholics, and she was the matriarch of our family. I said I was born on a family farm, and she ran everything. And my father was the baby of 3 children, and he's the only one that didn't leave, and he farmed with my grandparents, and she controlled everything. A lot of it was through guilt and manipulation and browbeating sometimes. And my grandmother was a very strong woman, and I idolized her. She was like a mother figure to me. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old. My mom was a little southern flower, if you will, a very sweet, passive woman. My grandmother was the opposite of that. And I like to say that my mom, my dad, and my grandmother was one too many people in that marriage, and somebody had to go. And it turned out to be my mom. As I said, there was no active drinking in my household, but the ism is riddled all through my family tree. My father was a compulsive gambler, and however it shows up, I definitely have been affected by alcoholism, to be sure, but I didn't know that until I got to you and I learned what that was. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old. My first abandonment wound, if you will, is walking down the hall one morning and seeing 5 little suits of clothes on hangers and a note that says, "Here's your clothes for the week, love, Mom." Now, when a child is that young, so much of let me just stop and say here, everything I share tonight is my experience, strength, and hope. It is just my opinion. It is not the opinion of Al-Anon. If you don't agree with me, I can appreciate you're entitled to your opinion. I don't want to hear about it. Go talk to your sponsor if you need to work a step on it. I've got a little bit of recovery since I've been here, but, keep coming back. That's what my sponsor would tell me. That's what I'll tell you. So I think that really... I felt like it was my fault that my mom left, because children don't understand that they're not the cause of everything. Our world is so small. And so my father remarried. I thought it was a while later, like 2 months later, my dad remarried because he didn't know how to stay alone. And what I did not know, a lot of what I will tell you, I've learned through inventories and talking to people in my family. I didn't know any of this when I got here to you, but you've helped me learn. My stepmother, who was a city girl, she didn't know how to cook cornbread, did not like her very much at all. Well, I mean, I'm like, we're Beverly Hillbillies out there where I'm at, and she can't cook cornbread. Lord have mercy. She learned to cook biscuits. Well, actually, she took them out of a can. We didn't like that either. But she wanted a daughter, and I was the firstborn. My father wanted a son. I clearly was not one, but he raised me like one, and I learned to hunt. And I got my first mini bike when I was 5, learned how to drive. He taught me to chew tobacco when I was 7, got my first shotgun when I was 8 years old. I mean, rip and roaring. We had 500 acres. We were just out there climbing trees and doing everything, and I loved it. I was like a little tomboy, and she wanted a little girl. She wanted me to be in laces and dresses, and that from the beginning. It was like oil and water, and we didn't mix at all. And what I know today is that she was an adult child of an alcoholic. I did not know that then, but I believe that she looked to my father as a savior. And my father, he inadvertently set me up, I think, on their wedding day. He said, "You'll never come before my children." Now, if he'd said that to a healthy woman, no problem. This is an adult child of an alcoholic. So from that moment, it was like the race was on. We were in competition for his love, but I had no idea about this. So shortly after they got married, she began to be emotionally abusive. She had a son that was 1 year older than me, and I have a brother 2 years younger than me. She was always fine with the boys. It was a competition between me and her. She began to be emotionally abusive in secret, of course, not too long after that. And a year or so after that, she began to be physically abusive. And she always said if I ever let anybody know that it would be worse when my father left. My father was gone most of the time because if he wasn't farming, he was gambling, so he was gone a lot. My father, and I don't want to paint a picture that's inaccurate, because my father was incredibly... he was always physically loving to us, very sweet to us, but I think emotionally he was just kind of checked out because he didn't know how to handle his own life. So it was a balance. It was a battle for me with my stepmother, and there's the beauty of growing up on a big farm is I had a motorcycle. All I had to do was get my chores up, and I could go ride my bike. My motorcycle, I would come home. I can remember when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I'd come home and get my chores done because home was the last place I wanted to be when I was little. The outdoors was fine, but not in the house. I'd grab my shotgun and drive down to the river. And, it's funny because in the rooms... Okay, God, we're going to go there. Okay, I never know what I'm going to say when I get up here. And for a long time I spoke, and I kind of had an idea how my story was going to go. But about 4 years ago, I had this radical change in my life. You'll hear about that in a little bit. And I don't have a clue where it's going to be at any time. So it's a mystery to all of us, okay? I hope we have a good time. And I forgot to tell you that I'm here because I love alcoholics, okay? I have this thing in me. If you put me in a room this big and there's one alcoholic, if Cliff was the only alcoholic in here and I didn't know it, and you put me in that room, I'd find him in like 2.5 seconds because I have a homing mechanism in me. I know how to find alcoholics. They're fabulous, wonderful, just wonderful people. And that's part of what almost killed me. But, because I take it to an art form, and I'm really not that different from the alcoholic, except I don't have an allergy to alcohol. I have a spiritual malady, and I have a hole in me. The hole in me is a God-sized hole, and I tried to fill it with everything but God until I found you. Okay, going down to the river. So I was raised in Southern Baptist household, and that's hell, fire, brimstone, going to burn eternity for hell if you sin. And I would go down to the river. When I got here, I had a hard time with God because that'll come out in a minute too. But I would go down to the river, and I would hunt down this little slough that would dump me at the river. And I can remember sitting at the river, and it was really hard because I couldn't tell anybody I was being really mistreated at home. I had to pretend like everything was fine. And my grandmother taught me, you put a face on, you put a mask on, you pretend like everything's fine, and you just don't let people know what's happening. I was dying inside. And I would go to my mom's house every other weekend, but I couldn't really open up to her because I was afraid, and I just had I lived in a lot of fear. And I would hunt down to the river, and I would sit down on the bank, and there'd be this cypress knees around these cypress trees, and it'd be almost dark, and the lake would be placid, and the sun would be setting, and the ducks would start swimming in, and the squirrels would be scampering through the trees, and the catfish would come up and pop on the top of the lake, and it would ripple out, and I felt peace. And what I know today is that was God just wrapping itself all around me and saying, baby girl, it's okay. But you have had to teach me about those miracles that happened in my life before I got here, because when I got here, I just remembered all the bad. But you've helped me through the steps in spiritual awakenings remember the good that was always there. And there were always angels in my life. I was a softball player, and I was really good. And while things were really bad at home, I would go, and some young mother on the team would take me under her wing, and I would get nurturing that way, And my mom tried to be there for me, but I was so closed off that I just couldn't let her in. When I was 12 years old, we got the family car one night, me and my stepbrother, and we went out, and we were You know, kids are, and we start things early in the country because there's not a lot to do out there. So we were drinking and going off with boys and stuff. And that night I was out with this little boy that worked for our farm. My daddy didn't want me to be with him, but I was with him. And I lost my virginity to him that night. And on the way home, after we dropped everybody off, my stepbrother raped me. And what I need to tell you is that was a traumatic event. What I can also tell you is I have a distorted perception. I have a disease of perception. That's how alcoholism has affected me. And because I was worried about getting in trouble for being with that little boy, because my perception is so messed up, I didn't know that what he had done, what my stepbrother had done, was worse than what I had been doing earlier. So I just decided not to say anything at all. And for 2 years, I lived under the same roof with him, and I would stay awake at night. If I couldn't go to sleep before my parents did, I would lay awake till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, just paralyzed with fear, afraid that he was going to come into my room. And he didn't, but I can tell you that that's no way to live. To have the state of adrenaline in your body so much like that, it messes you up, you know. And so I learned a lot of my own little ways of dealing with life that were not healthy or helpful. A couple years later, my stepmother, and also now on top of that, talk about learning to have manipulative skills, manipulating and being covert. I then had to make sure that I could try to position myself to not be around my stepbrother and not let anybody know that I was doing it. I became a master of deception. Thank God I was really smart. Well, still really smart. I guess that didn't end. But I was a really bright child, and I was a really great softball player. And a couple years later, when it happened again, my dad made my stepbrother leave, and my stepmother just got worse after that point. But he was gone, so it was better. When I was 15 years old, my grandfather died, and they lived probably from here to the end of the room from us across the pea patch. And my dad let me move in with my grandmother. And that was a miracle because nobody ever bothered me when I was around her. She wasn't touchy-feely, but she was very protective, and it was really nice living with her. She always taught me that I could do anything that I wanted to do, and nobody in my family at that point had anything more than a high school education, but she made me think that I could do anything in the whole wide world that I wanted to, and I believed her. And I had some really great teachers in school. And they pushed me, and I actually won I got to back up here, or stop. I'll back up. When I was 12 years old, my dad set me down, and he said, Kerri, there's 3 things that you can do that I will disown you for. I'm like, okay. He's like, steal, love a black, or love a woman. Now, I'd like to tell you that I stole my first girlfriend, and she was black, but that wasn't the case. My first sponsor was black. I don't know why he did this. I mean, I have no clue, but my first sponsor was black. That doesn't count. But I guess he saw something that I didn't, because I had no idea about my sexuality at that point. But I realized today, that he was right about the woman part anyhow. So I won a scholarship to a women's college, and I had been in school about 2 weeks till I realized what he meant. And I got myself into a relationship with a woman. And what I can tell you, I could save us a whole lot of trouble and tell you that for the next 10 years, I was in like the same relationships, but the faces just kept getting different. There wasn't any time in between any of them. There was no reflection. There was no contemplation. There was no meditation, no oming out, no anything. Just, I think this one's going south, and I like this one, so I'm going to strike up a conversation over here, so when this one's gone, I got one on the line, No other Al-Anon in this room's ever done that, have they? None of you. Okay. I'm the sickest one in the room. It's okay. I'll keep coming back. I didn't have very good examples. So, what happened? I kept going to college, got into my and this is funny too, because I was like 17 years old when I got to college. Well, when I got to it was probably about 5 or 6 years later, and I started doing inventories, and I thought the person that got me here 5 or 6 years later was my qualifier. And what I realized is that first relationship that I had in college, there'd be times when we would break up because it was, I don't know about you guys, but pre-programmed, my relationships were like high highs and low lows. I lived in the black and white. I didn't know about the gray area in the middle that is preferable, called serenity. I thought that was boredom, So, we were either all the way high or all the way low, and it was very dramatic. But extremes, that's what I understand, And, again, not that different from the alcoholic. So the first relationship, what I realize now is I look back, and we would break up one weekend because it was really dramatic, and that's another thing I do. I have a disease of wanting to be the good guy, but the truth is I'm just as dramatic and just as conniving as the alcoholic, but I don't want you to think that I am, you see. I want to be the one behind the curtain. Let's give them all the attention. First time I ever spoke at a conference, I thought I was probably going to wet my pants because I was so scared of all the energy of everybody looking at me, because I didn't want the energy. I wanted you looking at them because I'm afraid for you to look at me. You might see who I really am, and if you see who I really am, I might have to leave because I'm clearly not lovable. So anyhow, we would break up, and we had a suite. It was joined with a bathroom. And she would come home sometimes, and she'd been out late at night drinking. I didn't ever think she had a drinking problem, but she'd been, because we were all drinking. I was a freshman in college. Everybody was partying, right? So she'd come home, and it'd be late at night, and I would listen, and I'd hear the door open, and I'd hear a thud, and I'd go over there, and one night she had like literally just fallen on her face in the room after she got in there. Now, most healthy humans would probably think, oh, God bless her, she doesn't need to do that. But what I thought, because I've been affected by alcoholism, is I need to get back with her so I can help her not do that anymore. And that's how I started right out of the gate, right? So in my second relationship, it was my senior year of college. And I found out just before starting my senior year that my stepmother was very ill. My dad and my stepmom, my brothers, had moved to Texas by this point because they lost the farm. We had drought and floods, and they were out there living, and he was driving truck, and he happened to be in between jobs, and she went to the doctor, and they found out she had cancer, and it was so bad they wouldn't even open her up. There was nothing they could do for her, and he didn't have any health insurance because he was in between jobs. So he took her home to Mississippi for my grandmother to nurse her to death, literally to nurse her until she died, and I don't know why that's funny, but I guess it was. So in my senior year of college, 2 weeks before, or the spring semester, my stepmother died and my mom's mom died within 2 weeks of each other. I wanted to be a doctor, and I was getting ready to take the MCATs, and I'm absolutely certain I would have been successful at that. But I think what happened for me was a moment of grace, because something in me knew that I couldn't go apply to medical school, because if you're an Al-Anon like me, I'm not just going to go to medical school. Then I got to be the best brain surgeon in the world, and I'm looking at the next 10 years, so can't do that. Better do something else, right? So I decided that I was in my second relationship, and my partner at the time had a sister who lived in Los Angeles. She was going to move out there to pursue an acting career, and she asked me if I wanted to go with her, and I was like, sure. There's my first geographical, right? You know, I figured, why not? I thought I can always come home, right? I mean, you go somewhere, you can come back. So I told my family. They thought I was a little crazy, and I figured it didn't matter. I just had to do something. So here we go. Pack up my car, drive my little brown Pinto across. I had never been west of Texas, and I'm going to Los Angeles, okay? In Mississippi, there's one interstate. It runs from the north of the state all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, and it's 2 lanes each side. In Los Angeles, by the time you hit San Bernardino, it's like 6 or 7 lanes just on your side, you know. I was like, oh, my God. And when I arrived in L.A., I mean, I told you, I'm like backwoods, you know. I speak in constant colloquialisms and use verbiage that these people have never heard in their life before, and they look at me like I'm dumb as a rock. And it hurt my feelings, you know. And the whole Southern hospitality thing is true. You weren't supposed to hurt people's feelings like that. Anyhow, I got a job pretty quickly. I can remember sitting, had to cross La Brea down in Hollywood to get to my first job. And I can remember sitting there one morning, and it's like 7 o'clock in the morning, and a girl walks through the crosswalk, and she's got a purple mohawk, piercings in every orifice of her face, and a black motorcycle jacket and combat boots on. And I was like, oh my dear God, what have I done? You know, it just scared me to death because I was just such a little country bumpkin. At any rate, I arrived pretty quickly there, and I didn't have any tools for relationship, and in very short fashion, I realized that I couldn't talk or be present in my relationship, so I did what I always do. I started looking around and had a wandering eye. However, I did have morals and ethics, thank you very much. I had never been unfaithful to anyone. So when I found someone that I thought I wanted to see and I became attracted to, I came home and told my partner at the time that I wanted to break up and she needed to leave. And how about Friday would be good, okay? And I didn't understand that bludgeoning people with the truth is not something that we do here today. At any rate, broke up with her, got into more relationships, just one right after another. And also when I got out to L.A., I knew by then that my sexuality was different. And of course, that's difficult because, well, it wasn't in L.A. because everything's okay in L.A. But in the South, they would shoot you if you were someone like me, you know. So what I learned a lot, and this just compounded how messed up and distorted my perception was, because I felt like if I loved you, I couldn't let anybody know it because we could both be physically in a lot of trouble and maybe even killed for the love that we had. So I had a lot of intimacy issues because I couldn't have any public displays of attention. But in L.A., you know what? They have like a gay town. They have a parade. They have a newspaper. Like, it's unbelievable. And you know what? They have gay bars. You know what you find in bars? Alcoholics, right? Oh my God, I was like a kid in a candy store. I started going to the bars. I lived in the bars, you know. I mean, I was young. I was in my early 20s. I drank, but drinking was not my deal. The drinker is addicted to the drink. I'm addicted to the drinker. I'll tell you the truth, man. So I just was running and gunning, and I got into a lot of relationships. And in one relationship, the one right before the one that got me here, she drank a lot. She had a kid. That was fine. That didn't bother me at all. But she did what you talked about. She did that little white powder that made her be able to drink more, and it's unpredictable. Alcohol, there's quality control in alcohol. If you drink, I can just about tell you what's going to happen at every point in what you're drinking. But you start taking illicit drugs in your system, and I can't predict anymore, right? Because everything's off the table. Now you'll be gone for 3 days. I don't know where you are. So at one point, I told her she needed to quit doing cocaine, and I really thought she would because I didn't know anything about craving or addiction or anything like that. And when she didn't, I, in big dramatic fashion, threw back a shower curtain with her in the shower, and I'm like, I'm leaving, I'm out of here, and I left. So after that, I don't know if anybody's ever done this, but I set about trying to find out the lies that I was certain that she had told me, you know. Has anybody ever done that? No, I didn't think so. Clearly, we're worse out west than you guys are here, but... So in the course of trying to find the lies that she told me, I ran into one of her exes who was dating this gal that was 2 years sober in AA, AAA, I don't know what it was, but they said she didn't drink anymore. She was 2 years sober. And I thought she was all sullen, moody, and broody looking, you know. And here's the kind of person I am. The next time I met her, I like fell head over heels in love, you know. And we went out on one date, and now I'm married, because that's what I do, you know what I mean? I have some lust, and I'm married to you now. And there's something wrong with that formula, which is if you don't know someone, if you have sex with them before you know who they are, generally in about 6 months you might find out you don't like them. And that was a problem I've been having all along, but I didn't put the formula together yet. At any rate, I got together with her, and I, in short fashion, became incredibly addicted to this person. I just thought the sun rose and set in her. And she had this problem. She didn't drink anymore. I thought that was wonderful. I didn't understand about alcoholism. I just thought if she didn't drink, it was fine, right? No, drinking is but a symptom, people. You know, the disease is still there. And so I would go to AA meetings with her because I wanted to do everything I could to be a good partner and to be the, you know, riding up on my white stallion and be good, because at this point I have absolutely no sense of self. I was raised to make my dad and my grandmother proud, and everything was about me doing things in my life to make them proud, because I didn't know in and of myself, just because I'm drawing air, that I'm a beautiful child of God. I'm a little messed up by that religion by this point too, that now I have this conflict of like I'm going to burn in hell forever if who I am is what they say, and it was really bad. So I'm going to late night AA meetings with her, and we're at the Silver Lake Al-Anon Club down there at 10 o'clock meetings, and she was 2 years sober, and I would go with her, and they would read these steps, and they would talk about all the things that had happened and how they'd been raised up from the dead, and I thought it was really wonderful. I thought it was just unbelievable that they had found something like this that would give them life back. I didn't think I had a problem. She had a problem. I didn't have a problem yet. And a couple months later, we both showed up in that relationship. She had a problem with anger. I had a problem saying no. So she would get mad, and she would start to throw things. Eventually, she started throwing punches. And I did what I did when I was little, which is I learned to just roll up in a ball and wait for it to be over. When my stepmother would beat me, I just learned if you didn't fight back, that she would get finished faster, and then you could go on about your business. What I want to tell you is that I absolutely had a part in that, because I was so addicted to her that at a certain point, negative attention was better than no attention at all. And when I couldn't get her attention, I would start to push those emotional buttons to get a reaction out of her. And I could go on about the stories that would tell you how much I qualify for this. One time she put her fist through a window because she didn't want me to go back to work, and I had to take her to the emergency room, so she got what she wanted, right? She busted the windshield in my truck. One time she busted my eardrum, and I'm sitting in the emergency room, and the doctor's sewing my ear up, and he asked me what happened to me, and I told him I got in a fight with a friend. He said, "You can press charges." I said, "No, it's okay. I don't really want to do that." And it didn't even occur to me how bad that was. It took a bit longer, but I moved in together right away. Oh, here's a good one. If you don't know yet how sick I am, we've been dating about a month, and in Pasadena they have some strange parking laws, and you had to have a parking pass for parking on either side of the street. And I opened her glove box, and literally there was 101 parking tickets in there. And I went to work to my credit union, and I took out a $1,000 loan and paid those parking tickets because I wanted her to think that I was a good guy. But I don't have a problem. I'm just going to AA meetings with her, you see. And I got myself in a lot of trouble by doing that, financial trouble by doing that, because I wanted to make it better, and that didn't make it better. Let me tell you, it didn't make it better. So here's the picture of right before I got into recovery. She had a roommate that was 3 years sober who happened to cut herself quite a bit, and I would come home on Friday afternoons and see if that roommate would be laying in the floor, make sure she wasn't bleeding too much before I went back, and we had a knockdown drag out. But at 8 o'clock that night, we were sitting down at the Burbank Hospital at the AA meeting. We had our places, okay? And that was a sober household. Nobody was drinking in that household. And what I can tell you is there may be someone here today that's living in a sober household, that's living in that kind of dysfunction. And what I can tell you is you don't have to do that if you choose not to. You are a beautiful child of God. I don't believe that our higher power wants us to live that way, but I believe that the disease of alcoholism affects both sides of the family, and that until we learn and know that we don't have to live that way, sometimes we can get caught up in that. If anybody would like to talk to me about that afterwards, I'm happy to talk with you. So that rocked on for a little bit. I got kicked out of a car going 30 miles an hour one time. I mean, it was just insane. And at one point, her sponsor suggested that I go to an Al-Anon meeting. And of course I would. Her sponsor asked me to, right? Well, I've been going to a lot of AA meetings, and at that point they still smoked in meetings and they drank coffee. And so, hey, I'm used to being in AA meetings are awesome. They're like the bar with no liquor, right? And so I went down to this Al-Anon meeting, and I'm used to the AA meetings, and I go in there, and there's like 50 chairs in a circle, and there's Kleenex boxes in the middle, and someone's talking about their feelings, and they're crying. And I'm like, oh, heck no, I don't want to be here, man. You know, meetings were an hour and a half, so at that break, I shot out upstairs, and I'm like, I don't want to go back there. She's like, it's okay, don't worry about it. And so it rocked on, you know, and then we showed up again, and it was getting pretty bad. And I happened to go home. I had been going to a lot of meetings, and I went home, and my stepmother had died, and my dad was remarried. He remarried right away again to, like, her best friend. Whatever, that's his deal. But I had been going to all these meetings and listening to these steps and the principles and the tenets of this program, and it had been kind of seeping in a little bit like osmosis. But what I want to tell you is, if you're going to meetings and not working the steps, it's kind of like sitting in the garage and thinking you're a car. You can sit in there all day, it ain't going to make you a car, you know. I mean, if you don't take the steps of action that this program suggests, you don't get any results, you know. And so I went home, and before I left, I kind of inadvertently threw over my shoulder, almost literally, to my stepmom, what do you think Dad would do if he found out I was gay? Well, I literally went and got on a plane and headed back to L.A., and by the time I landed in L.A., my father had put it felt like it was 20 minutes, it probably was 2-minute message on my machine. He said, you're dead and buried as far as I'm concerned. You don't breathe air on the planet. I told the whole family not to mention your name in my presence, and unless you want to change your life and do what you know to be right, I don't want to have anything to do with you. That was devastating, but that coupled with I had had this sneaking suspicion that my partner was having an affair with our mutual best friend. And how many Al-Anons in here have stopped trusting that thing in our gut? This crazy-making thing that happens for me, and it happened early on. It's like, I know the sky is blue, but you tell me it's green so much that I start not trusting that the sky is blue. So I didn't trust what my gut was saying, and it took a couple days after that happened with my dad for me to get confirmation that she was indeed having an affair with our mutual best friend. That point is when the lights were on when no one was home. I hit my spiritual bankrupt point that day. And our third roommate, the one that was a cutter, had gotten into a program for, I say Al-Anonism, it was codependency, but we don't usually like to use that word in here. She had gotten into a program that she had treatment for that, and I was actually blessed to be able to get into that 21-day treatment program. And I went into that program, and I had never had any kind of therapy or anything. I just sat in a few AA meetings with her. And in 21 days, they pulled my emotional guts out of me inch by inch. And they made me put words to every situation that had happened in my life. I had to say that I was raped, that I was, assaulted and molested, all these things that I had never been able to put words to. Because if you have a situation in your life and you can't put a word to it, you don't have to deal with it. But when I put a word to it, now I've got to deal with it. And thank God I was locked up in it. Well, I went in my own accord, but I was locked up in a place where I had 21 days for them to do intensive therapy with me and show me what had happened and teach me some things. And when it was time to go, to me it felt like they took this big old jumble of emotional guts that I had, and they showed me everything, kind of put it back in my arms and said, here, you better go find a 12-step way to live, because outpatient help's only going to last for a little bit, little girl. I had gone to that one Al-Anon meeting, and when I got out of the hospital, I knew that I had to find a community. I thought I was going to go crazy. They told me when I was in the hospital that my entire belief system had been founded upon lies. What do you do with that? Your family's disowned you. Well, the truth is, only my dad was the only one that disowned me, but it felt like my entire family had. And I just was losing my mind, and God has a great sense of humor. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't believe that God makes anything happen to me. I believe that life happens, and because God's given man free will, I am affected by others' free will sometimes, and it hurts like the devil, right? But I also believe that God is like the oxygen mask. Anytime I'm having difficulty, if I just reach for and invite God into my life, God will come and comfort me if I really believe and ask. So I went into an Al-Anon meeting, and I asked, I will forever be indebted to Alcoholics Anonymous for helping me get to Al-Anon. I've kind of stole and what do you do when you plagiarize things, right? So I went in, I heard what they said in AA was go to 30 meetings in 90 days and get a sponsor and find someone who has what you want and ask him to sponsor you. So I went to this meeting, I went to a gay meeting, and I saw this lady who had a relationship with a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that is what I wanted, because I was not yet ready to leave that relationship. So I asked that woman to sponsor me because she had what I wanted. She had a sober partner. And she said she would. And she said that there were a few requirements that she had. She said, you got to go to meetings, you got to call me every day, you got to work the steps with me, and you got to take a service commitment. And honestly, I probably would have shoveled dirt if she had asked me to, because at that point, I knew there was nowhere else for me to go, and I thought I was going to lose my mind. And I worked at a job. I became a scientist as a result of not going to medical school. And at that point, I worked in like a 12 by 12 room, me and an instrument and white walls, 8 hours a day. Okay. So in the beginning, I would go to meetings, and the meetings were an hour and a half. And I would go, and in the very beginning, I couldn't feel my behind in the seat till about 20 minutes into the meeting. And they would do a lot of readings. They did. You got to choose either understanding ourselves or understanding alcoholism, the do's and don'ts. I mean, in the beginning, I couldn't even really hear the steps, but the do's and don'ts were like sound bites that I could get, right? Don't try to push anyone but yourself. Do pray, do find recreation and hobbies. Those things would start praying in my brain, because the rat wheel was like whirring. I mean, just in my head all the time. So I would go to meetings, and I went to 90 meetings in 90 days, and I took a day off, and that didn't work so well, so I turned around and did another 90 in 90. And my sponsor, God bless her, when I got to the rooms, I stayed in that relationship for probably over a year, maybe even a year and a half, and it was insane. I'm telling you, it was insane in our household, and I couldn't stop her. I could not stop. At one point, it got physical, and I went down to the police department, and I wanted to make a report, but I didn't want to press charges. I'm so not brave. There's another word I'd use, but this is being taped, so I'm not going to do it. But they came up. They sent an officer up to the house to talk to her, and she wasn't there. But word got to her that the cops had come, and something happened by me taking that action. Was that on some level, I began to know that I didn't have to be treated that way anymore. But I also began to know that I had to be the one to make sure that didn't happen. And my sponsor, God bless her, she was a saint. She taught me it was my life, it was my choice. She never, ever told me that I needed to leave. And I guarantee you, she hung up and called her sponsor like 100 times after she was talking to me. Because I would call, and she'd be like, are you physically safe? If I said no, she'd say, call me when you are, and she'd hang up. Oh, that's how I remember it. She wouldn't talk to me if I was in danger. And she never told me I needed to leave. And God knows I know she knew I did. But it's kind of like sponsoring people today. You can sit there and go, that's a train wreck waiting to happen, but they're going to have to figure it out for themselves. All I can do is try to help them get to God, So in the beginning, she helped me start to work the steps. And when I first got here, I knew that my life was unmanageable. I just wasn't really to concede that I was powerless over that alcoholic in the beginning. It took a little bit more time and a few more fights and a lot more insanity for me to get to the point where I realized I didn't have any power over her. When I got to that point, we got to step 2. My sponsor said, do you believe that I believe? Because I believed in the Southern Baptist God that was condemning and I was just going to burn in hell for eternity. And she said that wasn't going to work. I had to get a new God. So I could kind of see her point. But I didn't know what to do about that, because I didn't know how to unlearn this thing that I had learned forever, because I was a good little kid. I went to church twice on Sunday and once on Wednesday, sang in the youth choir and the adult choir to get out of the house, And I learned a lot. And, the beauty of the program is I've had so much healing around a God of my understanding, which I choose to call God. Whatever works for you, more power to you. Today I can say God, and it doesn't bother me. It did when I first got here. But, I can even go back and read parts of the books that were in that religion that I couldn't read when I got here. And it doesn't bother me today, because today I have my own religion and my own spirituality, let's say. Anyhow, I totally forgot where I was. Oh, step 2. So she asked me if I believed that she believed. And what I can tell you is I could look in that woman's eyes and I could see something that I could not identify at that point, but I wanted it. And what I know now is that she had serenity. Like I told you, I just thought she was boring because I couldn't identify what it was, That's how messed up I was. So we began to work the steps, and when it got to step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Oh, first of all, she said I could borrow her God. And so every night for like 2 years, I'd get on my knees at night, "Dear Stephanie's God, thank you so much." I'm not kidding you, because she told me I could, and I didn't have another God yet, so I used hers. And it works. If you don't have a God, or if you're having a problem with a higher power, find somebody that you know believes and use theirs. Mine God's so big, I could loan it out to every one of you, and there'd still be plenty to go around, Someone told me one time, if your God isn't bigger than every problem that you're ever going to have, you better get a bigger God. Get another God. You pick whatever you want. Doorknob. I mean, I'm a little sketchy on those people who have a doorknob for a God, but whatever, if it works for them. So we got to step 3. Oh, I got to tell you this story too. You know what? I can't. Okay. I got plenty of time. Oh boy. We got to step 3. Now, to go into that hospital program, that treatment recovery, for 21 days, I had to sign a paper that said I would pay them $316 a month for 18 months. And I didn't think I had that kind of money. I didn't, because I would send her to Nordstrom's when we got into a fight. One day she came home $2,000 later. I was like, dang, I didn't mean to go have that much of a good time. But I had like all this debt, and I couldn't afford it, right? And I didn't think I could afford the hospital. And thank God for the program, because she said to me, she looked me right in the eyes, as crazy as we were. She said, "My sponsor tells me if I have money problems, I ain't got no problems." She's like, "You have to live. If you don't go in here, you're going to be dead. Who cares if you have the money or not?" And she was right. So I signed the paper. And for every day for the first 3 or 4 months, I would go to a meeting and I was worried about my bills, and I'd call my sponsor and I'd talk to her. God bless that woman. But I'm getting back what I gave to her, trust me. I would call her and she'd say, "God will let you know if you need to get another job." She's like, "Kerri, God doesn't speak in code. I promise you, you will know." So I went to the mailbox one day, and I'm still really trying to find my idea of a God. She made me write a newspaper ad for a wanted ad for what the qualities I would want in a God. And I thought how stupid that was. I didn't ever tell her that, How many of you ever called your sponsor and hung up, and that's when you tell them all the things you think, right? That's what I did. I thought it was really stupid. But you know what? I did what she told me to do, because there wasn't anywhere else for me to go. And so I went to the mailbox one day, and I opened the mailbox, and there was a letter from the hospital, and it said, "Miss Keller, your hospital bill has been paid in full, and here's the last check that you sent to us." And in that moment, I knew I had had my first miracle, because that was not supposed to happen. The insurance had been fighting with that company. This is what it was, $316 a month. And I saved that paper, and I hit my knees, and I called my sponsor, and she said, "I told you God didn't speak in code. I hope it hit you over the head, okay?" And it did. So I was still in that relationship at that point, and my sponsor just kept working the steps with me. She's like, "Kerri, you just have to do an inventory. You're going to know whether you need to leave or not." She's like, "I don't know whether you need to leave. God within you knows whether you need to leave or not, and you will make that decision because it is your life." And what I can tell you is that it got very uncomfortable, and we broke up 100 times and went back together. And then God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. He moved her 72 miles away. I'm living in Burbank. He moved her to Redlands, and I physically couldn't keep it up anymore. I tried. I literally tried, and I could not do it. So eventually I was able to give that up, and we were still friends for a little bit. And, she had almost 6 years of sobriety. I can remember we were still friends, and that was actually not too bad. She was about to get married to this young man, and at 6 years of sobriety, she decided it would be a good idea when I was out there one weekend to take a drink, because she didn't feel like she was an alcoholic anymore. And I watched her from that night to 30 days later, her sticking needles in her arm, to start like a 3-year stretch of doing drugs across the United States. I don't know why that came up right now, but what I can tell you is I've seen what can happen. And that was really the only person that I ever knew that was sober that went back out again. And it was terrifying for me. And I got to work my program around that. And her friends would call me and say, "She got her teeth kicked out in the bar last night. You got to call her family," because her parents were in Families Anonymous. I'm like, I'm not her mate anymore. She has a husband. He can call them, And eventually I did call her parents, and that's when she told me she was going to kill me. I mean, she didn't. But, eventually she is a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous today. And after that, my sponsor looked at me as I got out of that relationship, and she said, "What's your greatest fear, Kerri?" And I said, "My greatest fear is being alone. If I'm alone, I'll die." And I really thought that if I was alone, I would die, that I didn't have any worth. And she said, "Well, I hate to tell you, sweetheart," she said, "but that's probably the fear that you're going to have to walk through in order to be healthy." So I took a deep breath and I said, "Okay." And called her up one day and I said, I went to college. And she said, yes. And I said, I've been doing this thing backwards. I've been having sex and trying to make a marriage out of it. And I think I got the cart before the horse here. And she kind of laughed a little bit. And I said, so here's what I'm going to do. For 30 days, if I find somebody I really like, I'm not going to kiss them. And if I really dig them, I'm not going to have sex for 90 days. And I'm pretty sure she fell off her chair laughing on that one. But she said, okay, you do that. So I began to try to get to know people because I realized I had not been getting to know people at all, who they were, right? And you know what I found? Water seeks its own level. I was a pretty sick puppy, and I was attracting pretty sick puppies. And so a lot of people would find out what my little rules were, and they didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore, and that was okay. I learned a lot. Kept going to meetings to have service commitment. One of my first service commitments was I was a literature person. How many people here, I totally forgot to do this, how many people here are in their first 2 years of recovery? Any program, doesn't matter. Anybody? Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm so sorry I didn't do that in the beginning. I want to welcome you to your new life. That's what they said to me when I got here. If you hear something this weekend that resonates with you, please don't leave. Keep coming back. Ask someone for coffee. Talk to them and ask them how it's changed their life and see if you can identify. In AA, they say it's hard to fall off the wagon if you're sitting in the middle of it. Get in the middle of the wagon if this deal is for you. Get in here and do the things that we do, and your life will change. They said to me, I appreciated what Cliff said earlier, and other speakers said too. The speakers have been great. They didn't say to me when I got here that it's going to be okay. They said, Kerri, you will be okay. We don't know how it's going to be, but we know that if you do the things that we've done, you work these steps, that you'll be okay. So I'm working steps and I'm doing inventories. I'm trying to learn how to date a little bit because she wouldn't tell me not to date. I just decided to do it my own way and did my inventory and figured out what my character defects were. And when I did my fifth step with my sponsor, I was scared to death because I thought that she was going to judge me. And truth is, I was sitting in meetings with her for like 2 or 3 months after that, and I'd watch her to make sure she was not looking at me any differently. But nobody's done that here, When she listened to my fifth step, she didn't run out of the room with her hair on fire. She'd done a lot of things that I'd done, but I was afraid because I didn't want you to judge me because people that had loved me very much had thrown me away, and I didn't believe that you guys wouldn't do that. So I'm doing my 6th and 7th step and identify my character defects. I started making a list of people that I had harmed, and I went to my sponsor with that list. Living by myself now, learning to be alone. And I took my list to my sponsor, and I had to take some people off the list. You see, I still have that distorted perception so bad that I thought I owed amends to some people I didn't actually owe amends to. And she showed me that it's very important to have a sponsor. It's hard to work the steps, in my experience, if you don't have a sponsor. There's some Al-Anons that think they want to do it, and I'm not judging them, but I didn't get better till I got a sponsor and started working the steps. Still going to meetings all the time. I can tell you that I've grown up in these rooms. I mean, in the beginning, I would go, and my sponsor would be like, sweetheart, Coca-Cola and peanut butter chips, crackers are not dinner, okay? You got to go get a real dinner. I didn't know. I mean, really, you guys have helped me grow up in here, Taught me about going to the doctor, taught me about going to the dentist. Good Lord, people I grew up with, they all have false teeth. I didn't know about going to the dentist, I mean, we're living way back in the woods. But I've just learned, because I was a baby when I got here. I was 24 years old. And Alateens, I'm so grateful that you guys got here when you did. I hope that you can stay and transition into Al-Anon. It certainly saved my life on more levels than I can explain to you. So when I got ready to make my amends, I was very clear and talked to my sponsor about the amends that I would make to the people in my family, and I made amends to my mom. And I had not been available to my mom for many years because I had been so shut down. And so when I got out of the hospital, my mom was actually the first person that I called. And I told her that I really wanted to have a relationship with her, but I had a one requirement, which was that we had to be genuine and authentic with each other. I had gotten so sick because I was not authentic and I wasn't genuine. When I got here, I had 2 feelings, okay and fine. Those are not feelings, and I didn't know how to experience any feelings. And so I told my mom I could have a relationship with her if we really could be there, and like if we disagreed, we could have an argument and know that nobody was going to leave. I had to be able to know that I could be honest and open with her. And she agreed to that. I did not call my father. I couldn't call my father. And it took a long time. I made amends to my family members and other people in my life that I could. And it took me a really long time to figure out what my part and my resentment with my dad was. I mean, like a couple years. And I realized that I was judging him for judging me. And in doing so, I was no better than what I thought he had done. And so I wrote a letter, because I was living in California, he was still in Mississippi. I wrote a letter to him, and I thanked him for all the wonderful things that he had done in raising me, because he was a really good dad. I mean, I could shoot the head off a match at 50 paces. You know, I mean, he taught me a lot of really great things and how to fix stuff. I fix stuff around my house all the time now because he taught me how to think in a certain way, you know. And he was a good dad in a lot of ways. And I thanked him for all that. And I mailed the letter, and the letter came back, returned to sender. And my sponsor said, Kerri, you did what you could. You go on about your business, you make the other amends, and you do what you can to make your life right. And so a couple years later, I found that he hadn't received the letter, and I sent it. And I don't know, honestly, if he got the letter or not, but I felt better about it. So I'm continuing working my life, and I'm, doing the 9th step, moving into the 10th step, taking inventory. And at that point, I had gotten into a relationship with someone else in another program, and it was going pretty good, actually. I'm starting to change on the inside, so I'm attracting a different caliber of person than I had been, and life was good. We didn't yell at each other. We didn't scream. Nobody got hit anymore, and it was pretty awesome. Wound up moving to Boulder, Colorado, and in Southern California, I had attended gay and lesbian meetings all the time because I could. And in Boulder, they just had Al-Anon, just mainstream Al-Anon, and it scared me. My partner quit going to the program because she didn't feel like she needed it, and things went south real quick, and I realized that I had to go. I didn't quit going. I just was afraid to share freely in the rooms at that point. And I had to make a decision then when things started getting bad that either I had to go and let you love me. I knew that I qualified because I'd been affected by alcoholism. And you told me a long time ago that was the only thing that I needed to be a member here. And I felt sure that you couldn't throw me out, but I hadn't really tried yet, right? We didn't know whether the rubber hit the road or not. So I signed up to speak at a speaker meeting, and I shared, and I didn't change pronouns. And afterwards, you all came up and you hugged me and you said you love me. And I cried. I cried because you loved me regardless, right? And I began to learn. Oh my God, I had so much of my own internalized homophobia. Nobody needed to be homophobic around me. I was doing it to myself, honestly. You know what I mean? And so I'm so blessed. One of the men in my home group in Boulder at that time, he was complete polar opposite of me, like a middle-aged white Christian man that was probably, everything I wasn't, he was. And we began to be really good friends. And his brother had committed suicide when he was young. And my friend and I got really close, but he wasn't able to access his tears. And I had learned very well how to have my emotions at this point. My sponsor had to give me a piece of paper with all the different faces on there that said what the feeling was that went with the face, I was remedial in some areas, okay, and I was smart, but this one, out to lunch when they did the feelings thing in school, but so I had learned to have feelings, and he would call me in the middle of the night sometimes when he couldn't sleep, and I would be on the phone with him, and he would be able to cry with me because he felt safe with me, and I could hold that space for him, and I loved that man so much. Oh, he was just like a brother to me. And I got out of that relationship one time. Sorry, I have to look at this phone because mine's doing something weird up here. That relationship that I was in Boulder, it got bad, and I was sitting in meditation one time because step 11, sought through prayer and meditation. I did a lot of meditation, and Boulder is a beautiful place to do it if you've never been there. But I was meditating, and I came out of meditation, and there were tears just streaming down my cheeks. And I realized in that moment that I had to leave that relationship because I was compromising my spiritual welfare by staying there. And that's the first time. I was at like 9 years in program by the time I realized that I really got it on a cellular level that I didn't need another person to be okay. And I knew that if I told her that I needed to leave, that I was essentially going to be homeless in that night. And she had her father died, she lost a 6-figure job, and her cat of 18 years had died that year. And I was pretty sure if I said I'm out of here, she was kicking me to the curb, and she did. But what I can tell you is that I didn't go without shelter at all because I had been so involved in Al-Anon. A friend of mine let me sleep on their couch until I was able to rent a room from someone in the program, and God just carried me like He's always done, I began to start speaking at different conferences about that point. I got my own little 1-bedroom apartment, and it was really quaint, and it was really nice, and I was living by myself, and I had just me and a fish tank, and it was all good. Me and God and the fish, we were good. And I went to Reno, Nevada to speak at a conference, and I went to the Sunday morning spiritual speaker, AA, and I met this little recovering alcoholics from Phoenix, Arizona, and we ran in. I really was moved by what she shared because I'd never heard someone share so authentically about so many tragic things from the podium, and I couldn't believe that her heart was so open that she could share about that. And we share about some really tragic things here, and I can tell you that, 15, 20 years ago when I shared about a lot of the stuff that happened to me, I was much more emotional about it than I am today, but I've had so much healing, I don't have the pain that I had today, And so I was moved by her. I went up to her and thanked her and went through the line again, and I gave her my phone number, and I wanted to go back a third time, but I said that really just wouldn't be cool, so I didn't do that. And I happened to run into her in the lobby as we were getting ready to leave. And honest to God, we had a moment of magic. There was probably this many people in that lobby, and it was like nobody was there but me and her. And we had a little banter back and forth around going home because the speaker host had confused me and her, and they didn't book my ticket till literally the last minute. What should have been 2-hour travel, I was in 12-hour travel, and I arrived with the resentment that I got over really quickly. But we laughed about that, and I wanted to see if we could ride home together, whatever. And it was unbelievable, the magic that happened in that moment. We wound up starting and being in a relationship together. And the first probably 3 or 4 months, we saw each other once or twice a month, but we were on the phone to each other probably, 20 hours a week. And when you don't see somebody, you can tell them a lot of things. And we decided early on that we would tell each other all the things we didn't want each other to know. And we both had quite a bit of program at that point. And I wound up moving down to Phoenix, and we've been together for 16 years now. And she's 20, I'm going to be 29 years, so she's 27 years sober, I believe, right now. And we're just living the 12-step life, I want to tell you. We are both incredibly involved in program, and I'm grateful for that. I don't feel like one of the things I did when I was learning to date was I made a list of qualities I had to have in a partner and some that I couldn't have in a partner. And that list grew, and some things changed and stuff. And, I actually had gotten to the point where I really didn't care if I found a partner anymore. Honestly, I didn't, because I was so content. Don't you know, that's when I went to Reno, and she just hit me over the head practically. And then I realized I was supposed to move to Phoenix. I'm like, I'm living in Boulder where it's beautiful, and God, you really want me to move to hell, Phoenix, Arizona? It's like 120 degrees down there, God. But that's where I was supposed to go and grow where I was planted, and I moved down there. We're rocking and rolling in the program, and I'm sponsoring people, and I started a meeting, and I wanted it to be a healthy meeting. It was I started an Al-Anon meeting at the little gay and lesbian Al-Anon club, because she had a step group meeting at 6 o'clock, and I started an Al-Anon meeting across the hall, but I wanted it to be a healthy meeting, so I became a GR, because I wanted us to be a part of Al-Anon, and that got me on the path I was eventually an area delegate, and if you've never been in service at that level, that'll give you a lot more growth too, and it was a fabulous experience. I've learned so much, I can't even tell you. The traditions and the concepts and the steps are a part of my life, and I hope they always will be till I draw my last breath. But I got involved down there, and in Phoenix they have all these nature preserves, and you can literally be hiking in the mountains in town and not even know that you're in town. And I was hiking on the mountain one day, and I thought, well, maybe I should. The whole point of working the steps, right? I was sponsoring people by then, and I was being of service, and I was going and doing things. And the whole point of being in the 12-step program is to be the best Kerri that I can be today. And I thought, maybe I need to try to be a good daughter, even if I don't know what that would look like, but regardless of my dad, whether he's a good dad or not, maybe I should try to be a good daughter. And so I came down off the mountain, and I got in my car, and there's a song, I don't know if you guys have ever heard it, it's by Mike and the Mechanics, it's called In the Living Years, and it's about a son who has a fight with his father. He has a long-time feud with his dad, and he doesn't get to make up with him before his father dies, and he has regret that he can hear his father's laughter and his baby's newborn tears. I came off the mountain, and I hadn't heard that song, I swear to God, in 6 months. I'm hiking on the mountain, I think that thought, I get in the car, and I turn the radio on, and that song comes on. I'm like, oh, Lord, I better buy a card, right? Because I didn't want to do anything disingenuous, so I thought, well, maybe I'll just send cards, And so I go home and I talk to Lori about it, and she's like, that sounds like a good idea. And I talked to my sponsor about it. She said, it sounds good. So I go to work the next day, and I'm sitting at my desk, and that song comes on again. I'm like, I get it. Okay, I put my pen down, and I went to Walgreens, and I bought a card, and I sent it to my dad. And I started sending cards on birthdays and Christmas. And I wouldn't be disingenuous. I mean, it would take me a long time to pick out a card, because I didn't want a card that didn't portray how I felt. So it couldn't be like, love, Kerri. I mean, it was like a picture of the Grand Canyon, and you open it, it said, Happy Father's Day. I could get with that, because I'm not saying anything I don't mean. And so I did that for probably 4 or 5 years. And I had no expectation of anything happening. And I went to my post office box one day, and I opened it around the time of my belly button birthday. And I opened the mail, and I pulled this envelope out, and my head did this weird thing. because I saw this, like I knew that handwriting, but I didn't know it, and I opened it, and it was from my dad. And he said, "Dear Snookum," that's what he called me when I was a little kid. He said, "I've never stopped loving you." And the Al-Anon me went, "Oh, really?" The sick Al-Anon me went, "Oh, really? Well, you got a great way of showing it." And the healthy part of me was like, "Oh my God, how much did it take for him to write this card?" And so we began, doing cards back and forth. And then I'm still doing program, still really involved. Life is good. Lori and I live with her mom. That's a whole other story. I won't get into it, but I'm on the mountain again one day. I think I need to quit hiking on the mountain, right? And I'm on the mountain, and I think to myself, do I want to wait for them to call me and say he's dead? I hadn't seen my dad in like 15, more like 17 years at that point. I thought that'd be kind of stupid to go see him in a pine box, So I called down my uncle's house, and my family, they're not well. They tell you when he's over there or whatever. And I knew that he was down at my uncle's house, and I called, and he goes, "Hang on, I want you to talk to somebody." And he handed the phone to my dad. My dad answered the phone. I said, "Hey." He goes, "Hey." I go, "How you doing?" He goes, "Who is this?" I said, "It's Kerri." He hadn't heard my voice in so long he didn't know who I was. And I talked to him for a few minutes, and I wound up calling him and asking him if I could come see him. He said that I could. So the next time I went home, because I would still go home. Oh, let me back up here and tell you, in 1991, my grandmother died. I was 2 years in program. And she had been my touchstone, and I remember being in the hospital, and she had died of cancer, colon cancer, but she had holes sticking out of every orifice in her face. And I remember right before she died, she pulled me down to the bedside. My dad was there, and he blew up at me at the hospital because I still hadn't changed my life, And she said, "Don't you give up on him." And you know what? I love my grandmother so much, I wasn't going to lie to her. I said, "Yes, ma'am." And also, I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that I would try and honor her wishes, And so it took a long time. But about 18 years after that had happened between me and him, I drove down to Meridian, Mississippi, and I went to Cracker Barrel, and I met him. And I remember my father, when I was in the third grade, my dad could run faster backwards than I could forward. You know what I mean? Like, he was like bigger than life. And I got there first, and I got in there. He came along, and he was just shuffling. He couldn't even pick his feet all the way up off the floor, and he was all shriveled up. And I looked at him, and I thought, oh, wow, God bless him. And I sat across from that man that day, and I want to tell you that I sat across from him, and it didn't matter one iota what he thought about me, because you had taught me that I was loving and lovable, and I didn't need his validation. And I sat there with all of Al-Anon with me, and we had a decent conversation. We didn't talk about things that made him uncomfortable, because why? That wasn't the point. The point was me to go there and see my father before he passed away. And I went 2 or 3 times. And actually, I went twice, and I was set to go the third time. And here's what I want to tell you. The disease of alcoholism is a gift that keeps on giving. When me and my partner got together, she said to me, "Do you want children?" And I said, "No." These were like our vows. "You want kids?" "No." "You want kids?" "No." "Okay, great." She goes, "I have to tell you, there's a caveat. My brother has kids. And if anything ever happens to my sister-in-law, we're going to have to take care of him." I'm like, "That's fine, no problem." So I would go to bed every night. God bless Kevin and his family. Because I hadn't been around kids. I mean, when I left college, I left home and was not around children. They were literally like aliens to me. If you brought me a baby, I held it like this. I didn't know what to do with it. God has a good sense of humor. And so he has 3 kids, our nieces, nephews. The niece is, she's about 24 now, and the boys are like 16 and 12. And the boys are autistic, and the older one is higher functioning, and the younger one is lower functioning. So when they came along, the daughter got lost, kind of, right? But she's a classic untreated Al-Anon, and she got to be about 20 years old, and she was living at home. She didn't go to college. She was just working part-time, didn't even have a full-time job. And I think she thought she could do it better than her parents could, and she got into a relationship, and she wanted the white picket fence, and she didn't bother telling her boyfriend about it, but she got pregnant. And we about lost it. I mean, I like, how can she afford that? She doesn't have a job. She can't support herself, because we learned about being fully self-supporting here. And Lori, my wife, said to me, she's like, "Kerri, we're not going to not love this kid because it has stupid parents, okay? I mean, come on, And I was like, oh, she has a good point, right? And so she was really set to be keep the baby every weekend, because she wanted to be a great aunt, and she loves babies, and I thought they were aliens. And so the baby came 2 months early, and it stayed 6 weeks in the NICU. And when it came home, it was home with its birth mom, who would move back in with her mom and dad to take care of the baby. The baby was 2 pounds 5 ounces when she was born. And within 2 weeks of her being home at her mom's house, we'd already had the baby 4 nights. And right before 2 weeks was up, we heard that she had given that baby rice cereal to try to help it sleep through the night because it was bothering its dad. And that baby didn't even have a fully developed digestive system at that point. And Lori came to me and she said, I want you to know. She said, I should have asked you about this first, but I didn't. She's like, I'm not that well of an alcoholic yet. She said, I told Sammy to bring that baby here, and we want to keep the baby until she and her boy get on their feet. And I said, of course, because we'd had the baby 4 nights already, and I saw what a beautiful little baby that was. Actually, when I saw her when she was born, the second day I went into the NICU, and again, babies are aliens, and I'm standing there by the incubator, and I look down, and all of a sudden I realized that tears were just streaming down my face because that kid's head wasn't even the size of my fist. And she was so beautiful, and she was fine. She got out when she weighed 5 pounds, and so 8 weeks into this child's life, she starts coming and staying with us. Colicky, oh my God, that kid was so colicky. We walked the floors. I was 6 months where I don't think I got more than 2 hours sleep at a night. And it was all right. And the birth mom would come over for about half hour every week and pretend to be mom. And I would have to get up and walk out of the room because I had been being mom. We had been being mom all week, And then Lori came and I really thought my spouse was setting herself up because setting herself up for disappointment because she said to me, that kid's not leaving here. And I'm like, oh dear God, there's nothing we can't stop her from taking this kid. You know what I mean? And so ultimately what happened is Sammy left the baby with us, and we kept the baby, and we were going to talk to her about an open adoption. And before she conceded that she would, here's how great God is. I'm 53 years old, and I didn't think as long as I would live that I would be able to marry a person that I loved, a woman that I loved in this world. And the marriage laws in Arizona changed, and I was able to marry my spouse, and we were able to legally adopt this child and both our names be on the marriage certificate. How awesome is that? Tell me there's not a God. And what I can tell you is that here's my experience. When I fully and truly take that third step and turn my will and my life over to the care of God, my life no longer belongs to me. And I guarantee you that because I'd be the last person on earth that anybody thought was going to have a kid. And I'm that kid's person now, okay? She wants to make every step that I make. She's smart as a whip. She's stubborn as the day is long. And I guarantee you I'll be astounded if she doesn't mind up in one of these rooms. She's turned 4 on Monday. She's already written the books for everything, I guarantee you. But and you know what? It's been so amazing. People said to me, you're 50 years old. You're going to have a kid. Are you crazy? I'm like, we established I was crazy a long time ago. I mean, that's like shutting the barn door after the horse has left. It's over. I'm crazy, But here's what I know. You taught me that if God gets me through it, He'll get me through it. Literally, God moved mountains, and it was so clear that it was God's will for me to I didn't want to have a kid. Honest to God, I didn't. But the situations in my life changed. It made it clear that I was supposed to be a parent. I was afraid to be a parent. I didn't think it was in the cards for me. I'm a little lesbian from Mississippi. We're not supposed to be parents. We're misfits of society. I'm not kidding you. That's what I thought. I remember one night sitting there rocking that baby. And that's when we hadn't adopted yet, and she hadn't agreed to it yet. And I was rocking her. She had said she was going to come get her. She threatened, but she never did. And I was rocking that baby, and I thought, oh God, what will I do if she comes to get her? And in that moment, the respect that I had for my mother made a decision when I was 7 years old to walk away from us because she knew that my father could provide better for us. She went home to a paranoid schizophrenic mother who rented an apartment, and she left me there on a 600-acre farm with a man who had money or land who could help me have opportunities. I realized in that moment that my mother overrode probably the greatest instinct that a mom could have and left her children so they would have a better life. I can't even begin to think how I must have hurt and how much she loved me to make that sacrifice. Up to that point in my life, I had been grappling with the abandonment of my mom doesn't love me, and now I realize how much my mom really loves me, Our relationship is unbelievable, my relationship with my mom. What I forgot to tell you was when I actually married Lori, I was going to go back for the third time down to Mississippi, and somebody, I don't know who, but somebody was mutual friends with my dad, and I posted a picture of our marriage license on Facebook, and somebody showed him that marriage license, and he called me the day after I got married to her, and he said, don't ever bother coming to see me again. And what I can tell you is that hurt. It didn't hurt as bad the second time as it did the first. because I had a lot more recovery then. But what I can tell you is it didn't take me long to work through that and to understand that God was telling me that it was okay to move on. God was saying to me, Kerri, I have all this love over here. All you got to do is turn toward the light. Turn toward the love, baby. It's there for you. You just got to go to it. Don't waste your time. They said to me when I was early on program, they said, don't keep going to the hardware store trying to buy avocados, Kerri. They don't sell avocados at the hardware store, for God's sakes, And so what I realized is I need to stop going for the love where people aren't wanting to love me. And I pray for my father, and I genuinely pray for him that he find peace. Because now that I'm a parent, I really don't understand how you could not acknowledge your child. But I know my father's been affected by alcoholism, and so I pray for him because healthy, happy people don't behave that way. Someone said hurt people hurt people. He doesn't know any better. But what I know is that through the spiritual awakenings that I have gained as a result of working these steps, I have a full life that I've been blessed beyond measure. It's pressed down, overflowing, spilling out of my life. So much joy. Ivy had been living with us. Ivy probably wasn't even a year old left yet. And we had it really good because Lori's mom was a fantastic cook, and we lived together, and she was retired, and she would cook all the time. We went camping one weekend, and we came home, and Shirley, my mother-in-law, I came home, and she was cooking, and she said, I've been trying to orient myself all day long in this kitchen. And I thought, God, that's odd. You put this kitchen together. We moved in here 4 years ago. Turns out she's got Alzheimer's. And, when Lori and I got together, one of the first things she said to me was, early on, she said to me, I'm going to take care of my mom. And you need to know that now, because if you have an issue with that, you need to just keep rolling. I'm going to take care of my mother. And because I hadn't worked out all the issues with my family yet, I thought that was pretty awesome. But she already knew she was going to take care of her mother. And her mom hated my guts initially because she thought Lori was going to move to Boulder. But then when I decided to move to Phoenix, she liked me a lot. I would call down there before I decided to move, and I'd be like, hi, is Lori there? Yeah, hold on. And she would go get her. But then once I moved down there, she's like telling the story, it was awesome. We wound up living with her, but we was going to move out, but I thought, well, what's the point of moving out now and having to move back in together in like 10 years? And besides, she cooks dinner 3 or 4 nights a week, and it's pretty cool. And she's cool. She loves me, right? She's accepting of our relationship. So we had a wonderful relationship. Mostly, mostly. How many of you always get along with your in-laws? Any of you? I'm the only, okay, thank you, good. Somebody else doesn't. But I love her. And you know what? We're taking care of her mom, and it's progressing, but I've never been down this road before, so I don't know how fast it's progressed. She still knows us, but she doesn't, she doesn't remember anything she likes to eat. It's getting worse, but I assume it can get a whole lot worse. But you know what? You guys are helping me because we have a community, we have a tribe, and we go to meetings and we share. And it's hard. It's hard to lose someone and them not be gone. But you guys have taught us so much about having our feelings that I can grieve and I can go and be with the people that help me figure out what's going on. And it comes outside. I'm a good partner today. I'm a good spouse. I still do. My biggest character defect is that I'm judgmental and I'm critical. And I try not to do that on a daily basis, and sometimes I screw it up really bad. But thank God my partner's in program, and we try to do the best we can with what we have. And, I'm not perfect. I still try to run things, and I'm probably still pretty controlling. But our defects kind of match each other, we're pretty happy. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but I don't have to know what it's going to look like. Because I've learned that the answer to every question in my life is God, truly. The whole reason the 12 steps were designed, because of our powerlessness, was to help us find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than us, right? So if I just keep looking for God, that's the answer in everything. You guys help me find God. When I can't get to God on my own, I come and I find you, and some God with skin on it is usually all it takes, They never told me it was going to be okay. They said I'd be okay. And life is really hard sometimes, One of my very best friends, Artist G, was out of Oklahoma, and she came and became a member of our home group, and she got cancer, and I became her medical power of attorney, and we helped her die, basically. And that was not, I've never planned somebody's eulogy and given a eulogy before, but I did it. And I didn't have to do any of it alone. We say in my home group, which is Principles Above Personalities, a lot of us say a lot of the time that the very first word is the most important word in all the 12 steps. We We don't ever have to do it alone again. I got to do my work, but I don't have to walk the path alone. Not at all. I will trudge. If I tried to give back every day till I draw my last breath, I can't possibly scratch the surface of all that you've given me. There's no way that I could. As I said, I have a life today beyond my wildest dreams, and it's beyond my. I wouldn't have dreamt it. Honest to God, I got a 4-year-old. Are you kidding me? That's crazy. I'm gonna be 70 when this kid starts college. Oh well, I can't worry about that. I can't worry about that. I have to stay in today. If I'm worried about the future and I'm worried about the past, I'm missing God right now. Because what I know is the only place I can experience the presence of my higher power is in this moment right here. Not tomorrow, not last night. Right here, right now. That's the only place I can feel God. So I'm going to do everything I can do to be in this moment right now. I want to thank you for sharing in my recovery today, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kerri. We have a gift for you from the convention committee.
Let me get the shoes. I got it. That's all right. I'll put them on.
She took her shoes off. She was very comfortable. Thank you again, Kerri, for coming all this way and sharing your experience, strength, and hope. In closing, I would like to say that the opinions expressed here were strictly those of the person who gave them. Take what you liked and leave the rest. The things you heard were spoken in confidence and should be treated as confidential. Keep them within the walls of this room and the confines of your mind. A few special words to those of you who have not been with us long. Whatever your problems, there are those among us who have had them too. If you try to keep an open mind, you will find help. You will come to realize that there is no situation too difficult to be bettered and no unhappiness too great to be lessened. We aren't perfect. The welcome we give you may not show the warmth we have in our hearts for you. After a while, you discover that though you may not like all of us, you love us in a very special way, the same way we already love you. Talk to each other, reason things out with someone else, but let there be no gossip or criticism of one another. Instead, let the understanding, love, and peace of the program grow in you one day at a time. Will all who care to join me in the closing with the Serenity Prayer, followed by the Al-Anon Declaration?